Right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Anna Marsh, and in a moment, I'm going to be joined by Francesca Liberotti. And today is day 2 of the series of talks we are doing across the month of October in honor of Menopause Awareness Month. So I'm just waiting a few moments to make sure we've got Francesca with us, which I think we do. And just give us a moment.
Oh,
Okay.
hi. I'm too low. Too high. Hang on a second.
I'm in the wrong place as well. Let me just actually sit back. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm looking forward to chatting to you today. Just while Francesca gets her video sorted and everybody's waiting, just to let you know that today we're going to be talking all about estrogen. On Friday last week, we did an overview of just generally the menstrual cycle, what should technically be happening in a healthy and normal cycle. We gave a general overview of the hormones, progesterone and estrogen. We talked a little bit about some of the basics to support your body. But obviously, hormones are complex, there's a lot going on, and we wanted to use the next few talks to really go into things in a lot more detail, so that you really have everything that you need to support your body or to begin supporting your body. Obviously, there's always nuance. So welcome, Francesca. It's so lovely to have you here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, good. Almost at the end of my working day, so even better.
Always good, yeah. Awesome. So we're talking about estrogen today, and I thought a really good place to start would actually be to do just a little recap on what we spoke about last week, Friday, which is talking about what should be happening with estrogen in a healthy cycle, and then what starts to change after maybe the age of 35 on average, maybe closer to 40. What starts to change as we transition through the menopause? Because sometimes what's happening in the beginning is not what happens closer to the end. So, do you want to just go through all of that and kind of give people a run through?
Yeah, sure. As we did touch on it, as you said last week, but just to recap, during our normal, I say normal, like, yeah, normal menstrual cycling years, which basically start from when we first start having periods as a teen up until perimenopause, which I'll explain in a second. For the first couple of years that we start having cycles, it's a period of adjustment. So the body's just kind of getting used to everything, to the hormones, and estrogen can be a little bit fluctuating and can be really heavy at, like, high at sometimes, which is why some teenagers have sort of heavy periods, painful periods in the beginning, and then they settle down a couple of years later. Then we have, 20s and early 30s where estrogen is naturally ebbing and flowing at different points in the month. It's relatively low on the day one of the cycle, which is day one of our period. As our period starts to finish, estrogen starts to climb again. It then ramps up just before ovulation, which is kind of like halfway through your cycle. And then it tapers down in the second half of your cycle, and it's low again just before you come on your next period. So that is the normal cycling of estrogen. But as we approach perimenopause, which can be for some women from basically age 35, I would just, I think perimenopause definitely gets more pronounced into your 40s and later into your 40s, which I'll talk about in a second. But from around 35, 36, your hormones are definitely changing. They're starting to. It can be real subtle changes that you don't really even notice. And then the further you get into your late 30s and definitely early 40s, you've started to notice it. What's happening there is that because the production of hormone is basically governed by the communication between your brain and your ovaries. It's your brain constantly throughout the menstrual cycle. It's your brain talking to your ovaries, telling them what to do, basically. So when we get to perimenopause, it's the start of this slow, gradual transition from basically active ovarian function, production of those hormones, to inactive. And the communication between the brain and the ovaries starts to sort of I guess break down. It changes, but it sort of, yeah, it kind of starts to break down a little bit. It's not as robust as it was in your 20s and early 30s. So that sort of changes things a little bit with how much estrogen is produced and when. And it can go on a bit of a roller coaster ride. So it can be 3 times higher than it ever was, than it ever has been at certain points in your cycle. And then it can drop really low like a roller coaster, but not a fun one that we said last week. And basically symptoms of high estrogen would include breast pain, heavy periods, painful periods, water retentions, that kind of puffiness around your ankles and fingers, changes in mood. And then symptoms of dropping estrogen would be things like hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, weight gain. I mean, weight gain is a symptom of so many different things, but again, water retention as well. Sleep issues is one of the biggest things. Mood changes and that sort of anxiety as well can be one of the biggest ones, and migraine headaches. So those are kind of some of the symptoms of low estrogen. So that could explain why a woman in her 40s sorry, could be experiencing symptoms that she would think are, oh, I'm going into early menopause. Like, I've heard so many women say that I must be going into early menopause because of the hot flashes and night sweats, which society, you know, just associates with menopause. But actually it's perimenopause, and it's what is you know, it's explainable by what I've just said. So what's also happening at perimenopause when estrogen's on its roller coaster is that progesterone is declining, and we really do love the effects that we get from progesterone. It's the calming hormone, it's anti-anxiety, it's anti-water retention, it lightens your period. So there's kind of those two things going on at the same time can cause a little bit of disruption. And we might even start to notice subtle changes like longer or shorter cycles, longer or shorter periods, more PMS, heavier periods. And it might not be every month that we have those symptoms, but we just start to notice things that kind of maybe weren't there in our 20s and 30s.
Yeah, so to just break that down, because you've covered quite a lot in a very short space of time. So what's kind of happening is that the brain is trying to communicate with the ovaries, and it's saying, make estrogen, make estrogen, make estrogen. But the ovaries are like, hello, what? Can't hear you. What should we do? And then it's like, it catches up and it's like, oh, make estrogen, make estrogen, make estrogen. And then it can like make too much. So
Yeah.
you're sort of like fluctuating between these stages of not responding and then almost having like an overcompensatory response. So it's you're having these very high levels, as you said, like through maybe even up to 3 times as high as what you normally would, and then maybe also periods where estrogen will drop. And obviously we know that estrogen does drop at other times because of you know, where we are in the cycle sort of premenstrually. And I guess as well is that when you mentioned like the shorter and the longer cycles, if you know, if estrogen is getting made, if a lot of estrogen is getting made earlier in the cycle, that's going to potentially trigger ovulation earlier, which would make a shorter cycle. But if the estrogen is having a delayed response, it's that communication between the brain and the ovaries is breaking down, there may be a delay in ovulation, and then that can cause a longer cycle. And something I've definitely noticed myself is I tend to do longer, shorter, longer, shorter. It's like the average is 28, but it might be like 26, and then it will go 32. But that's just my pattern, and I guess everybody's pattern is going to be a little bit different. And then I guess what you've said as well is at the same time, what we experience is a decrease in progesterone. And that's kind of happening in the background the whole time, I guess, as we move through perimenopause. And we really need progesterone to counterbalance some of the roller coaster that's happening with estrogen. And I think you've used a really beautiful analogy before about like progesterone being the calming best friend and estrogen being like the crazy one. Do you want to just share that? Because I think it's a really nice way for people to conceptualize what's actually going on.
Yeah, sure. I actually heard it from another practitioner. I can't remember who it was, but I didn't make it up myself. But I thought it was brilliant when I heard whoever it was say it. Basically, we can liken estrogen to that sort of diva friend. So we all have a friend that loves all the attention and like
loves a bit of chaos and drama.
Yeah, loves a bit of chaos, loves a bit of drama. yeah, not really down for a calm lifestyle and life and soul of the party, and yeah, always bringing the drama. And she's not necessarily bad at all. She has like a great heart and has all the right intentions, but she could always do with a calming best friend to sort of bring her back down to earth at times and sort of say, all right, calm down, you know, get off the table and just sit on the chair. And that's quite helpful, isn't it? Because otherwise that diva friend just kind of goes off, and they just need that down to earth reminder. And that's what I liken progesterone to. And also people talk about yin and yang. So obviously yang is the estrogen and yin being the progesterone. So that's why as well it's known as, progesterone is known as the period lightening hormone, because it does lighten your period. So again, that's another example of how it's, you've got too much estrogen, or estrogen dominating the show will create heavy periods. And then with the lack of progesterone, if progesterone comes along and kind of brings her back down to earth, she can lighten your periods for you and calm. It very much works in the brain to sort of calm anxiety and
help with sleep as well.
Yeah.
And so we'll be going into progesterone in a lot more detail next week. But I guess for now, it's just understanding that the estrogen diva is doing her diva thing, probably even more diva-ish than usual. And progesterone is just not around as much anymore to counterbalance that.
Yeah.
And it was sort of the waxing and waning of estrogen, whether it's very high at times or very low at times, that's often what is responsible for a lot of what women will call menopausal symptoms, but actually it's perimenopause, because we talked about last week, menopause is only one day, which is the day 365 days from your last period, and after that you are post-menopausal. So what do we do with all of that, Francesca? Someone comes to you and like, my estrogen diva is crazy. I don't know where the progesterone calming best friend has gone, but she's definitely not around because I've got mood swings, hot flashes, night sweats. I'm just not feeling like myself. I've put on all this weight on my belly. I'm tired all the time. I'm grumpy. I'm not sleeping. What do you do? From an estrogen perspective? We talked about the general stuff last week.
Well, one thing I just wanted to add on to the description of what's happening at perimenopause is the further, as I said, the further we get into our 40s, the more pronounced those changes and the roller coaster becomes. But as we get later into our 40s and more towards the menopause approaching, that's when those estrogen levels, they will still be on a roller coaster, but they will be declining. But earlier 40s, they're on the roller coaster and they're higher. So that's just, but whatever stage you're at, what I'm gonna discuss now is helpful it's beneficial, because we still want to calm the roller coaster no matter what. And obviously with the fact that progesterone isn't around, we still want to do the same things. So in a nutshell, I think the main things I would want to address are, which don't sound overwhelming with this, because it's quite simple really when I break it down, but to address how many, because basically what's happening is we're making lots of estrogen, and or not necessarily, but it's on a roller coaster. And without progesterone, it's the dominating hormone. So what we want to do there is sort of calm estrogen's roller coaster, but calm the symptoms of dominance. So we want to make sure that we're not unnecessarily adding to the load of estrogen in the body by way of, let's say, chemicals that can be coming into the body through day-to-day life that are shown to disrupt the endocrine system, which is the hormonal system. So certain chemicals in our day-to-day lifestyle have been shown to, they can basically come into the body and mimic the real estrogen. So then at the receptor site of the cells in the body, it basically means that they're allowed into the cell in the same way that estrogen would be, but it's not real estrogen. And what they've also been shown to do is disrupt communication, disrupt the balance, and also impair the body's ability to break down used estrogen, which is another thing we'll talk about in a second. So really those chemicals are coming in through things like tap water. So something as simple as just using a Brita water filter jug can be helpful. You're never going to be able to eliminate all the toxins, but we live in the real world. We have to be realistic. We don't have to be perfect. So that can help. And then the main other ways are through skincare products, hair care products, makeup, and household cleaning products. And really it's all your normal commercial brands. They will all have various what we call hormone disrupting chemicals. So you can again counteract that by simply not trying to do it overnight. I literally did it over a couple of years, but slowly, as and when products start to run out, start to look at different brands that are completely natural. Don't be fooled by the word organic as well when you look at skincare stuff. You're looking for natural, toxic free sort of things. And just, you know, if your shampoo runs out or your moisturizer runs out, how can you maybe replace it with one of those products? And there's lots of different brands which you can talk about as well, but I like things like Green People, Sukin, God, there's loads now, Neil's Yard.
I think a good resource for people to go to if they're interested in this is the Environmental Working Group website. I think it's ewg.org. And I think you can search there on, you know, it's a wealth of information about, you know, toxic chemicals and things we're exposed to. But also when you're just reading the labels of the products that you do have, the key words that you're looking out for would be anything which has a paraben in it. Sometimes it might say like methyl paraben, for example, or anything that has phthalates in it. So PTHALATES, phthalates. Got that right. That's a good one. Those are the kind of the main ones to look out for. I don't know if there's anything else you look out for, Francesca.
Yeah, parabens, phthalates, hate saying that word. What's the other one? Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. I've actually got a blog on exactly this, and it lists out all the kind of words to look out for. So that's just on my website. But I mean, really, it's everything that's commercially produced. So if you just walk into a normal, you know, high street toiletry shop, it will be, they won't probably stock the brands that are completely natural. You would want to source out what they are. So, you know, Green People is definitely one of them, but there's lots of, you can just start looking for brands that are very similar because so many more of them are coming out these days. And the same cleaning stuff like that. I like Method, E-Cover, and even if some of them aren't 100% toxic free, even if they were 50% better than the ones that you've been using, that's going to help. You know, every little helps basically. So that would be my number one thing that I would look at. And the body's ability to basically break down used estrogen, because the liver and the gut are responsible for breaking down our used estrogen. Once the body uses it, it has to go. And if we're not doing that effectively, efficiently, then again, that's another risk of another place where we can be retaining estrogen in the body that we don't need to retain, and it's just adding to that load. So then after looking at the kind of chemicals coming in, I would just be looking at how, or before actually, they're both just as important, is supporting your liver and your bowel to, you know, efficiently detoxify, break down estrogen. And I think in a nutshell, it's things like simple things like eating enough protein in the diet, because protein breaks down into different amino acids, and all of those amino acids are kind of co-workers for the liver to do its effective job at breaking down estrogen and detoxifying it. After the liver does its job, it sends it to the gut, and that's kind of like the final phase of getting estrogen out of the body forever, because the liver does all the breaking down work, sends it to the gut, but then if it doesn't go out of the gut quickly enough and effectively enough, it can also be reabsorbed from the bowel back into the body. So I guess maybe we should break that down into...
Yeah, the way that I like to think about it is we're making estrogen. So how do we, I don't want to say stop, because we do need to make some estrogen, but how do we modulate the estrogen production? So that's like upstream. What are the upstream factors which are affecting estrogen production? And then downstream, like once we've made it, we need to get it out of the body, because if there is excess, we want it to be cleared. And that's where the liver that you've just talked about and the gut and the bowel that you've just talked about comes in. So we've talked about avoiding estrogen mimicking molecules, so the xenoestrogens, which may be in your beauty care products. There's a couple of other things I would maybe add there as well. I don't know if I should touch on them now, or should we should go a little bit more into the gut. No, the only thing I was going to say is that what can happen as we transition towards menopause is that we can make estrogen from testosterone, and that can have an impact on the balance between, we might be making a lot of estrogen and that negatively impacts testosterone, and that's done by an enzyme called aromatase. So the more body fat we have, generally that's associated with higher aromatase activity and higher estrogen production. So I would also say, in addition to watching out for these chemicals, we also want to think about just maintaining a healthy body weight, doing some resistance training to encourage testosterone. We also know that muscle mass is really important as we get further along in life. So those are just like a couple of other things to think about. And in addition to that, I would say all the other things we spoke about on the previous video, like just managing stress, getting enough sleep, all of that sort of stuff. So now we've kind of thought about what's impacting the upstream factors contributing to estrogen production. The next thing you've said is we need to get it out of the liver. Well, it doesn't mean we don't need to get it out of the liver, but the liver is how we start to get it out of the body. So we know that some people are genetically do that better than other people. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, and how do people support their liver for estrogen clearance?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of touching it with amino acids from protein being the sort of co-workers, they're like cofactor nutrients that help the liver to do its job. So there's lots of different nutrients that help. And like you touched on, some people genetically would need more than less than others. But just as a, you know, as a kind of overview without knowing that information, is really things like B vitamins. So all, especially folate, so that's B9, B6, B12, and then all the others as well. But those are the three main ones that are really important to help. Things like magnesium, choline, even, I mean, the substances that we find, there's compounds that we find in cruciferous vegetables, which are the vegetables that come from the brassicas family. So cauliflower, broccoli, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. They contain some compounds known as DIM, indole-3-carbinol, sulforaphane. So those kind of help with the different pathways in the liver for breaking down estrogen as well. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of also polyphenols and antioxidants and flavonoids and things that come from all the plants. So especially if you're thinking of vegetables, it's really important to think in terms of all the colors. So your dark green leafy vegetables, and then your purples, your oranges, your reds, your yellows, and also herbs and spices, whether they're dry or fresh, things like rosemary, turmeric, which is the curcumin is the active compound there, and they all help those pathways, because there's a few different pathways for breaking down estrogen in the liver. They all help those pathways do their job a lot more efficiently. Would you add any?
Listening to this and they're like, well, how do I know? Like, how do I know if I'm doing this well or not? How do people know if this is something they need to work on?
I mean, going by the symptoms that we're talking about today, you know, if you're suffering and if you're experiencing any of these symptoms that, you know, potentially estrogen dominant style symptoms like the heavy periods, the painful breasts, painful periods, all those kind of things that we're talking about, it's likely that you could do with supporting your body to break down estrogen better. And there are things that hinder that breakdown, there are things that help it. So what I've just mentioned are the things that help, and then obviously also really important to support. So let's say you've supported your liver to do the right things, then that detoxified estrogen gets sent to your bowel. So really important to be supporting your gut health as well. And what's really important to look at there is what you want to be supporting is regular, fully formed bowel movements, so at least once a day, which is simple things like making sure you're well hydrated, making sure you chew your food really, really well so that you break down the food better and therefore form a healthier stool better, and you can go more regularly, and adding in fiber preferably from all the different colors and types of vegetables. So they are literally a triple, quadruple whammy of benefits to the body. Things like flaxseed as well, which is also, we can talk about that separately, but helpful for estrogen balance, but also a great source of fiber. All kind of nuts and seeds, all basically plant-based foods are extremely great fiber, and as long as you're getting all the different colors as well. So that will help to form a healthy stool and pass it regularly. But what's also important with gut health is the population of beneficial bacteria in the gut. So we want to make sure we constantly have a healthy population. And guess what also helps that is the fiber from all those different colourful vegetables. So it's a triple whammy. You know, you definitely want to be filling half your plate with colourful vegetables, and also when it comes to fruits, things like berries are really great to include. So those will help. That will help to kind of grow that beneficial bacteria. The reason we really want to do that is we want to keep certain types of unfriendly bacteria at bay. Because too much of certain types of unfriendly bacteria can increase an enzyme in the gut that's called beta-glucuronidase. And that enzyme, if it's too high in the gut, can have the ability to unattach or deattach the detoxified estrogen that the liver's worked hard to do, that's now sitting in the gut, and it's now kind of attached to a carrier molecule, if you like, ready to go out via your stool, and it's sort of sitting there waiting to go. And this beta-glucuronidase enzyme can deattach that, break apart that attachment, and send that detoxified estrogen back into circulation in the body and increase the load. So that's the kind of two main reasons that your gut health is really important to support as well.
So if I were to kind of like summarize this, you know, if we're thinking about liver support, if we're thinking about bowel support, you know, it sounds like eating a lot of color and variety of plants is the number one thing to think about doing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's nuance with that. For some people, plants can be problematic if there's GI issues, but as a sort of general recommendation, would you say that's something good to aim for?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, as long as people can tolerate all the different types of vegetables, there might be some, you know, like the cruciferous vegetables, for example, that might be problematic for some people because they contain too much sulfur. But for, you know, for the most part, then yes, definitely that's what you're looking at. And then I mentioned protein because of the fact that it breaks down to amino acids. So we don't just want to be plants only. We want to also make sure that there's plenty of protein coming in as well. And also good fats, especially omega-3. So the omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, which predominantly come from fish oil. So oily fish, your sardines, mackerel, salmon, trout. They are also helpful for those pathways in the liver, and also really helpful for reducing inflammation, which is something that can disrupt hormone communication. So yeah, in a nutshell, quality protein, all the different colors and types of plants and berries, nuts and seeds, flaxseed especially. I love to say 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed a day can be really helpful. And then all your good fats, so especially the omega-3s, but also the extra virgin olive oil, the avocados, olives, coconut fat, whether that's milk, cream, oil.
And what do you think about GLA? Because when I've done testing, like red cell fatty acid testing on clients, I don't think I've had one client so far this year have adequate amounts of GLA. And all my clients, when I put them on GLA, they really notice a difference within their first cycle. So would you say, I know we can't make individual supplement recommendations on an Instagram live, you know, you need to speak to your practitioner for that, but would you say GLA would potentially be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. And I've had personal experience with it as well. I've only started using GLA as a supplement. I buy it in the oil form, but I think I might just switch to capsules next time because I'll remember to take it easier. And that's been really helpful for me. I've definitely noticed a reduction in certain estrogen dominant like symptoms that I was suffering with. So yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that we can, I don't know if you just said it actually, about cycling it. So just taking it for a couple of weeks in the cycle or the whole way round, it kind of doesn't really matter. I think you can test that.
I didn't mention about cycling, but that's actually a good thing for us to talk about. And it can also be really helpful. I like to use a cycling approach to supplements because if someone is taking a lot of supplements, it just helps to cut down on the expense, and it also helps to cut down on just how many things you take in a day. But what we're referring to specifically when we talk about cycling is you cycle your supplements depending on where you are in your cycle. So the follicular phase, which is day 1 up until you ovulate, you'd maybe do like a fish oil supplement. and then the from ovulation to the end of your cycle, which is the luteal phase, where if we've ovulated, we'll see a rise in progesterone, then that's a good time to take your GLA. And you can also do seed cycling. So that's a tablespoon of flax and pumpkin at the start of your cycle for the follicular phase, and then a tablespoon of sesame and sunflower seed in the second half of your cycle. Admittedly, I eat all those seeds every day. So I don't cycle my seeds, but I cycle my supplements because I'd rather just get all the goodness from those seeds daily. And I'm sure as a whole, just having all those essential fatty acids, as you've said, is beneficial across the board.
Yeah, that's definitely my approach too. I tried seed cycling before, and it's easy to do, but I really just prefer to have exposure to all of those the four seeds that are involved all month long. And yeah, to save money. At the moment, I'm actually doing fish oil and GLA all month, but I think I might switch that and just do the 2 weeks of fish oil and the 2 weeks of GLA, just to cut down on that. But it's all helpful.
Yeah, just practically as well, I'll share. I did some red cell fatty acid testing at the beginning of this year. My GLA was low. My omega-3s were actually absolutely fine. And I still do take a little fish oil just as like a precaution, but I started out just doing like a full month of GLA, and then about after 3 months, I just switched it down to a cycling approach. And then when I retested my GLA was fine. So I think the cycling approach is adequate to make sure that you sustain a good level. But if you feel it's something you need to maybe do like a loading month first and then start cycling.
Yeah. And GLA, just to note, is also called borage oil.
Yeah, or there's another one, starflower oil, also contains GLA. But yeah, there's a few different products out there that you can use.
And also,
okay, that was a little sidetrack. I was also going to say, talking about this detoxification piece, if you're working with a practitioner and if you have a budget for it, this is one of the reasons why I really like the Dutch complete hormones test, which is a urine test, because it's able to assess, where you are with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, but it also is able to assess how well you are metabolizing. And I think that's where you can really get into the nitty gritty, and you can know if you are doing this well. Do you need to worry about your detoxification, yes or no? And if you do need to worry, what specifically could be beneficial for you?
Yeah, so that's definitely a good way to know. Like you mentioned earlier, how would you know if you're effectively breaking down estrogen? The Dutch test is a great way to do that. I definitely think the symptoms, going by symptoms is a surefire way to know that something needs support. But then maybe made lots of great changes by, as per what we're saying today, maybe you could give that sort of 3 months and then say, right, I'm going to do the test and see what I'm left with and which pathways need support with what nutrients. And that's a great way, for example, to put a proper targeted plan in place for yourself. Yeah.
I mean, more advanced testing is not always financially accessible to everyone. So if I didn't have the finances for a test, I would implement everything we've talked about in the previous video, everything we're talking about today, everything we're going to talk about next week. And then I would notice, okay, what's changed, what's different. And if I felt, actually, no, I feel good now, then you don't need to worry about testing. But some people, like, I quite like to know. I think it's the scientist in me. So I'll find the money somehow, ask for a Christmas present or whatever to do the testing, and then like work with it in that way. So there's just different options depending on your budget.
Yeah, and I definitely have clients that do it once a year, and they actually ask for it as a Christmas present. So
I did that this year with my Nutrival. I was like, just asked anyone who's going to give me a Christmas present. I was like, can I just have some money towards my Nutrival so I can get my testing done?
How Christmas presents have changed.
Oh, totally, yeah. And so what else do we need to cover? We've talked about detoxification, we've talked about the gut a little bit, we've talked about the importance of plants and protein and those good fatty acids, and making sure we're looking at our personal care products. Is there anything else there that you think could be supportive for somebody to modulate their estrogen?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to talk about alcohol, because it is such a big one. I hate to be negative and say that there's stuff that we must be cutting out, but and it's not that it needs to be cut out, as you know, unless you particularly want to do that, but definitely looking at reducing it if it is something that you consume a high amount of, because just in the presence of alcohol, the liver just cannot, you know, will not be detoxifying estrogen, and it just puts that on the back burner while it's detoxifying alcohol. So if it's coming in too often and in large amounts, it's just going to lead to excess estrogen in the body, because it's halting that detoxification process by the liver. So it just has too much of an effect, unfortunately, on our hormone health. You know, not so much in our 20s. That's what I was saying, like when everything was more robust menstrual cycle wise in our 20s, early 30s, you could, you know, I hear so many women saying, oh, but I never had these symptoms before and I drank more than I do now. And unfortunately, we are just so much more hormonally sensitive in our late 30s, and as we go into our 40s, the stuff that we did in our 20s and early 30s just probably can't run in our 40s. We need to really just take a look and change the way that we live, you know, in a hopefully see it as a positive, because it's only going to help you to feel better and feel good and actually live life more, because you're feeling better. So I mean, I used to drink whenever I wanted to, not a lot, but whenever I wanted to. But now I've just noticed that even one drink makes me feel too terrible, and it's just not worth it for me. So I just don't bother. But there are, you know, let's say, I think we mentioned this the last session, that if you were to say you have one small glass of wine on 2 or 3 days a week, it's probably not going to cause that much havoc. Your liver's probably able to cope with that small, and I mean small glass, versus you're having half a bottle, you know, every time you drink, or a whole bottle every time you drink, and that's happening too often, then that is a different story. So it's just looking at your intake and seeing where you can, even just a small bit each time, where you can reduce it.
Yeah, so I think we talked about that last time, and obviously nobody wants to be told to drink less if it's something that they really enjoy, especially if it's a very strong coping mechanism for a lot of people to manage stress. So I'd highly recommend, if the suggestion to reduce or give up alcohol really is quite triggering or activating for you, that's actually an invitation to just look and see maybe if it could potentially be an unhealthy coping mechanism. And it's not about just going cold turkey. It's about working with yourself and your body and your awareness, so that you can find other ways that help you to cope, and maybe ways that will even open up your life more and make it even more enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think we talked about the chemicals, we've talked about reducing or removing alcohol. Well, let's say reducing cruciferous vegetables. We talked about protein, colourful fruits and veg. Yeah, I mean, really, those are the sort of top line things to start with. It's always important to start with the lowest hanging fruit. I think you would agree. Like, there's no point, you know, really you need to look at where are the areas that need that little bit of help now, rather than thinking, okay, I need this massive list of things that I need to work through. It's just, where can you start to make these small changes once you've done all the things that we're talking about, for example, seeing where you are symptoms wise, let's say in 3 to 6 months, and then, okay, what more do I need to do? What isn't really taking me as far as I'd like?
Yeah, and I think as well is just like, you want to think about what are the easiest things for you to implement that will move the needle the furthest. So, you know, if life is already busy, if your hormones are already making life feel overwhelming, it's difficult to like just overhaul everything at once, although that is some people's personality, definitely mine. It's not always a good thing. So it's just about like, what can I do? What feels achievable? What can I be consistent with? Can I just add a salad, you know, to my meal every evening with, you know, 6 different colors of veg, or whatever it might be? Start with the thing that feels the easiest, that feels doable. And I would say just focus on, you know, what helps you to feel good and what helps you to feel better.
Yeah.
So the final thing I just wanted to touch on is estrogen as a hormone replacement therapy. because I think that's a question that people have is like, do I need to go on hormone replacement therapy? Is it appropriate for me? Is it dangerous? So I have my opinion on this. So just curious for you to share yours first.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a place for hormone replacement therapy, and I do think it's important to have that discussion with your doctor. All I would say is that I would always recommend that you ask your doctor about body identical hormone replacement therapy rather than the kind of typical historical synthetic. And it is becoming more and more widely available in the NHS. More and more doctors are really open, and in fact they would be the ones to recommend it before without you even asking. They would say yes, but it should be body identical, and that's great if that's your doctor. If not, if they're straight away just going for the more historical forms, synthetic forms, then you will just have to say, oh, actually, could I try body identical, please? And that's basically body identical progesterone, body identical estrogen. The progesterone is what's known as micronized progesterone, so that comes in capsule form. And I think the UK brand is Utrogestan, but it'll be different brand names in different countries, but it's micronized progesterone in capsule form. And then the estrogen is via a patch, is the safest way to take it, rather than the synthetic forms that I can't remember what way they come. Cream, I think it was tablet form, I'm not sure, but it's the patch, and it's Everel and Estradot, I believe, are the UK brand names. So I would ask for that, because basically what body identical means is that the hormone that you're taking, whether it's progesterone or estrogen or both, has been made completely molecularly exactly the same as the one that your body naturally makes. So it's body identical, and that means that your body can deal with that hormone. It knows exactly what to do with that hormone. It does the right things in the body and produces the right effects. You know, the things that we're missing from, let's say, low estrogen, low progesterone, using body identical hormones should help us get back those amazing benefits that we're missing. Whereas the synthetic form of HRT most likely won't do the same thing. So, for example, the synthetic form of progesterone is known as progestins. That's the form of progesterone that we would have in hormonal contraception and the kind of old school synthetic HRT. And it doesn't really have the same effects in the body. In fact, some practitioners say it has the absolute opposite, because it's just not made molecularly the same. It's completely different to the real thing. So I would definitely suggest that towards the middle or end of perimenopause, or the age is going to be different for many women, if you're really, really experiencing those horrible symptoms of low progesterone, the sort of, you cannot sleep anymore, you're just an insomniac now, you really struggle to get to sleep or stay asleep, you're irritable, your mood is all over the place, and you feel way more anxiety, things that wouldn't have bothered you before are just really, really getting to you, and you have that sort of heightened sense of stress, really sensitive to all stress now, then I would definitely speak to your doctor about micronized progesterone, at this stage of perimenopause. And then when you get closer to menopause, you can discuss, because we don't have to have estrogen and progesterone, you can start with just progesterone and then add estrogen later on when estrogen does genuinely get very low. So that's my take on HRT. What would you say?
Yeah, so I would say a few things to add is that this is another reason why I do like testing, or why I do like a Dutch test, is because before we start putting any hormones into the body, we want to make sure that the body can metabolize them well. And that's that liver, making sure the liver is working really well, and making sure the gut is working well. So I think this is often the thing, is that people don't feel well because they're going through perimenopause, or they've come up against menopause or postmenopause. They're not feeling good, and before they look at managing their stress and eating their plants and getting adequate protein and all of that, it's like straight to the synthetic hormones, when the body is not necessarily set up to process those well. So I come very much from a place of, let's support your body first. And then, yes, there are going to be some situations where using body identical hormones can really make a difference to someone's quality of life. I was working with a client recently. She did a Dutch test, and she, things weren't great, but they weren't that bad, but she wasn't feeling great. And she said we did some stuff together around changing her exercise, a lot of the things that we've actually spoken about in the previous video. And she was like, you know what, I'm still not feeling great. I need to come see you again. And I said, you can come see me again, but I'm just wondering if maybe it would be better for you to see this person. And it was somebody who could recommend bioidentical hormones. And she did. And now she constantly contacts me and just tells me how amazing it is. And thank you so much for referring her. And she was given progesterone and testosterone. And she's in her early 40s, and she just said it's made such a difference to my quality of life. Thank you so much. But that might not be appropriate for everyone. Or that might not be everyone's personal choice. So I think that as people get towards, as you say, estrogen is like waxing and waning in the run up to menopause. So giving estrogen in that time is kind of inappropriate because there may be times when it's high, there may be times when it's low, but it will become lower towards the end of that perimenopause phase, and then it may be more appropriate. But I think it's really important that it's done through someone who knows what they're doing. You and I, as nutritional therapists, it's not our place to recommend it, but we can point people in the right direction and give them counsel about if it may or may not be appropriate for them. Just not give them counsel, but present the options to them, help to educate them a little bit more so that they can go and speak with somebody who is able to recommend it. And so I think it's also, you want to work with someone who knows what they're doing. You also want to work with someone who's going to monitor you, because you need to do regular testing to make sure you get the dosage right. You need to be closely monitored. Estrogen specifically can interact with histamine. So if you are someone who is histamine sensitive, taking large amounts of histamine could impact, large amounts of estrogen could start to have an impact on histamine-related symptoms as well. So you really want to make sure that you're working with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I think just getting, like you said, just keeping an eye on it all the time, making sure it's the right dose, it's that you need it. But yeah, definitely it's all about doing the diet and lifestyle things first, and not as like a temporary fix either, as a, basically tweaking your nutrition choices and your style of eating and your lifestyle habits in favor of a healthy and happier perimenopause and menopause. And then what you're left with, the hormone replacement could help with. And even would be that you're working with a practitioner to do the Dutch test, so you before you start the hormone therapy, so you can make sure you're going to detoxify it properly. And someone actually asked the difference between body identical and bioidentical. And I would just say, I'll see what you say as well, but I would just say that firstly, the term body identical is more better accepted in the, by the NHS, the conventional medicine world. They have, it's respected basically. Body identical is proven form of HRT to be safe and good. Bioidentical is more or less the same thing, but there's this thing where you can basically get bioidentical hormone therapy. You can kind of outsource it yourself. You can go to you can get it from compounding pharmacies where they kind of make it up for you. And that's not very well understood or respected by conventional medicine. So it can be a little bit poo-pooed. And also I just think it's not as regulated. It's not regulated basically. Body identical hormones are fully regulated and endorsed, whereas bioidentical, although it's potentially the same thing, it can be unregulated, and there'll be a lot of places you can get it from where it's perfectly safe, but it's just not officially regulated as our body identical. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and they can, just a final thing to wrap up the conversation around the HRT is that there's been a lot of scaremongering in the past around HRT and increased health risk. And I think a lot of more research is coming out now, which sort of disproves the original risk. A lot of the studies were done on women who were given estrogen replacement therapy in their 70s and 80s so they'd basically been through perimenopause, become postmenopausal, gone on for a few years, and then all of a sudden given hormone replacement therapy. And the suggestion now is that it's actually safer to start earlier. So if you're starting in your 50s or late 40s, that actually has better health outcomes than starting later in life. But I don't think anyone would wait that long if they were suffering. Well, hopefully no one would wait that long if they were suffering, but just so that people know that there's less to be afraid of now, but you would have to speak with your doctor still about any possible risks.
Yeah, and there's also the doctor that I really like online. She has a great website. Is Dr. Louise Newson. She's fantastic for menopause and HRT, and she has lots of different articles on sort of how to speak to your doctor, how to ask for it, basically what to ask for. So that's a really good resource to look at.
Yeah, because I know with anything, I just go to the doctor and I just get so tongue-tied. And so sometimes having, some pre-planned questions or pre-planned things to say can be so helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And is there anything else you wanted to touch on relating to estrogen, or I saw there was a question in the chat, so maybe we can answer some questions.
Yeah, I think I've said everything I wanted to say, and yeah, I think there was a question that we haven't looked at.
So I'm struggling here to scroll through without.
It's what would the symptoms be if your body is making estrogen from testosterone? So basically the aromatization. What would the symptoms be?
So did you want to answer that, or shall I?
I don't mind. You go. I'll add.
So I would say there's not necessarily going to be a separate set of symptoms per se, but the mechanism by which testosterone is converted to estrogen results in estrogen dominance or higher amounts of estrogen, and potentially low testosterone. It will depend on the person's body. So what we're discussing today is more so that that's a mechanism that could be contributing to the symptoms of high estrogen. So the symptoms of high estrogen will look the same, whether it's coming from xenoestrogens, high amounts of stress, whatever else might be going on, or poor detoxification, but the high aromatase is one of the mechanisms which can contribute to that. The other thing you could also always just test for, even just using a blood test, would be just test your testosterone levels. Low testosterone isn't necessarily indicative of high aromatase, but it's always kind of worth just doing your due diligence to check. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was going to say, something like the Dutch test where you can see if you're making a lot of estrogen. Again, you wouldn't know if that's particularly via aromatization, but you might get a better idea from the Dutch test, and then confirming with a blood test whether testosterone is low. And, from those two things, you could assume that potentially there's a lot of aromatization happening. And then what you said earlier, building up testosterone through building muscle, lifting weights, making sure you eat enough protein, making sure you're sleeping really well, there's not much stress. All of those things help to increase testosterone. And then if you're working with, I'd say work with a practitioner one-on-one to understand how to potentially slow down aromatization. Obviously body fat is a big one, but there are other things that can be done as well to slow it down.
Zinc, vitamin D, high levels of inflammation in the body. So you really want to reduce the inflammatory load, which is kind of, everybody needs to do that across the board for everything. So that's pretty much blanket advice. Good. So I think that brings us to the end of today. Of course, if you've watched the training, if you've got any more questions, you can always put them in the comments box. Next week, we are back talking about progesterone. So we focus today primarily on estrogen support. Next week, we will be looking at progesterone support. So I hope you will tune in and enjoy our talk then. Francesca, thank you so much for being here. Before I let you go and continue with your day, do you just want to remind people where they can find you if they want some more support and information?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. Obviously, you'll see me tagged in this post, so you can check my account out there, because in my bio there'll be links through to actually a free hormone balancing class that I'll be doing via Zoom on, I think it's Monday the 8th of November. And then that also takes you through to my website where I've got blogs. I also have a program that's running from January called Rebalance and Thrive, all about rebalancing hormones and thriving. So all this kind of stuff that we're working on. So yeah, just check out my bio and then see the different links there of how to get in touch with me as well if you want to get in touch with me. We've had one question from, sorry, I don't even know if it's You Glow Mama, about the menopause doctor that I just mentioned. It was Louise Newson. And that,
yeah, maybe we can come back and just put some links in the comments in the video, just in case people need it. So we'll put in the Environmental Working Group website, and then you can put Louise's website in as well.
Yeah, I've also got a few websites for toxic-free household cleaning and stuff as well. I just couldn't think what they are off the top of my head, but we can put those in as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll get that done and update the post. So come back and check, and if we haven't done it, then send us a message and we'll make sure it gets done. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here today, for watching, for engaging, for asking your questions. If you've enjoyed today, you can always give us a like, give us some hearts, share this with your friends who need to know, and we'll see you all again next week. See you later. Bye.